Welcome to the Landscape Library's YouTube channel. I'm Jordan, founder of the Landscape Library and voice behind the tutorials. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and visit our website, thelandscapelibrary.com, to read landscape-focused articles or enroll in our online courses teaching the top softwares for landscape design. If you have questions or comments, add them below and enjoy the video. In this video, I'm going to show you how to use the command EXTRUDECURVE in Rhino. And this is the command that's going to kick off the 3D section of our course. The most important thing to know when designing landscapes is by drawing in 2D first, you are making the landscape process faster. And what I mean by that is, let's look at an example from the underline in Miami. The underline in Miami has a different set of walking paths underneath a pre-existing structure. For example, this walking path has a dimension of maybe 8 feet. It serves a purpose of walking only, but if you take a look at other walking paths within the same project, there's different function within the space. This space is meant for bikers and walkers. 2D is meant for functionality purposes mostly. For example, the designer was taking into account that multiple people needed to pass by. The Z direction did not really affect this space. Now, if you take a look at what else is in here, there's these little benches that are made out of stone. The designer placed those benches in 2D first, knowing that that bench was going to be 18 inches high. So you don't really need to know to design in the Z direction until you're in the 3D model, which when you're designing in 2D first, you're eliminating the fact that you're designing in the Z direction, and you're saving so much more time and focusing on the functionality of space by designing in 2D. So to start things off, we're going to recreate all the different lines that we've done in the previous section, whether it's circle, line, or square. So let's start off by doing the circle command, and let's draw a radius of 4 feet. With the rectangle command, let's do a 3-point rectangle. Let's draw the first one in the first direction in 5 feet, top direction in 5 feet. Let's also use interpret curve. And for interpret curve, let's do a closed surface or a closed line and an open line. There's my open line, and then for a closed surface, I'll create another shape, and it's closed. Now, like I said, with 2D versus 3D, all of these could be different components in the landscape, whether this is a landscape bed, a pool, a fire pit, or maybe this is a stepping stone. All of this should be done in 2D first to save time in the 3D. So when you're going into 3D, you can see that there's 4 different screens here. I've mostly been operating in top view first. And during the interface section, I did not go over that there's 4 different screens that you can go into. For example, if you wanted to enlarge the top screen only, you can simply click into the top link. To exit back out, double click into the top and it'll go back to normal. That goes for every other tab. For example, if we were going to be building the 3D section for the 3D model, you might want to be in perspective view. So to be in perspective view, you could simply simply double click into perspective and it'll have the whole screen in Rhino. But for this tutorial, I want to show you how useful it is to have these 4 different screens up when designing in 3D. So to start the command, we're going to use extrude curve. Press enter, and it's going to ask to select, or it's going to say to select the curves you want to extrude. I'm going to select the circle first, and when you have the circle selected, you could press enter. Now you can see it might be different on your platform only because both sides is checked. Just like you've seen in section 1 with all the 2D commands, there's the separate bar that comes up. I'm going to hit B to only do one side. So I can control which way it's going up. And you can move your cursor around in all the different boxes, and you can see how it affects in all the different views. For example, if I wanted to be drawing an elevation view, maybe this is a pool that I only want it to be 4 feet high, I can see how high this pool will be in elevation view. Maybe it's relating to a certain structure. That way it's all cohesive, and it's easier to be drawing in 3D with all these different views. So to complete the command, you can simply either move it manually, or you can type in the exact dimension that you want it to be. So for this instance, I'm just going to use 4 feet, and it extrudes in 4 feet. Now what's really nice about Rhino is that there's different views. Right now you're seeing just a wireframe view. You're not seeing the actual surface of the object that you created. To change the surface or to change the viewport display, you simply go to this arrow and you can change down to all these different types. For example, there's shaded, there's rendered, there's ghosted, which you can see behind the surface, there's X-ray, technical, artistic, pen, arctic, and ray trace. Typically I stay on shaded view, and if you can see that it took a while for the technical to load, that's because basically everything below wireframe starts to get higher in data. So shaded is the least amount of data that the program is using to render your render your objects. And you can change that in all these different viewports, and you can see how it changes. Now I'm going to use the same extrude surface command on all the other lines in here, and you can also select the same lines all at once and extrude all of them together. For example, if I wanted to just highlight the objects in the perspective view, right click, you can see that they all can come up. Now if you take a look at extrude curve and what it's actually doing, it's actually only extruding the curve in just a one direction, and if you look over the top of it, you can see that it is hollow. If you start looking at objects within the landscape differently in the way that if you start to question how can I model things faster within the landscape, you're going to become very fast within Rhino, and you're going to be able to dissect certain elements and use the commands to develop the landscape plan even faster. So for instance, right now, if you look at this surface, it is a hollow surface, but in future lessons we're going to be able to just quickly use commands to cap these off or to make these a volume. And I'm just going to use extrude curve on this last surface here. And in this case, I'm going to go negative feet, so I'm just going to go below the Y line to get into negative. Now another thing that I want to just mention, it is not a command, but it still does the same thing as the command extrude curve. So for example, I just drew another circle within Rhino, and when I select that object, you remember that the gumball comes up. You can uncheck gumball to make it disappear, but if you want it on, you can certainly turn it on down here, and it will also perform the same command by selecting the little circle between the arrow and the point. So if I selected the circle, you'll see that it is drawing a surface just like the ones that we drew. And that could go for any shape, even curves. So if we were to do interpret curve, do the same type of thing here. Select gumball. You can see that there's also different directions. So if I wanted to use the green arrow, it also works in the green arrow, and then also the blue arrow, as well as the red arrow. Now if you look at the command, or if you look at the line command, you can still see that it does the same thing. So for instance, if we wanted to go up, it'll create a sheet vertically, and if we wanted to go in either direction, you can see that it does that as well. So that is the command extrude curve. In future lessons, I'm going to show you how to cap these objects. And remember, drawing in 2D is much faster than getting into 3D first.